Hello, everyone. Welcome to another More Layers. I'm Seth Mariano.
And I'm Jordan Smith, and welcome back to what is essentially a SpongeBob miniseries we're kind of doing right now. A couple weeks ago, we started going season by season with the plan of going through the first three and then the first film. Uh, we were originally planning to do all of that in one episode, but realizing how many episodes there are and how long it takes to justifiably talk about each of them, we're kind of splitting up. Last week, we got through half of season 2, and today we're going to finish that and possibly even work in a little bit of season 3, but we'll see how that goes. But yeah, once season 2 is done, we'll do season 3 and then the first movie.
Yeah, we're kind of playing it by ear, and we're going to start off by picking up the second season in progress. Where did we leave off?
The last episode we talked about was season 2, episode 10, which ended with "I'm Your Biggest Fanatic."
Right.
And that's the one with Kevin the Sea Cucumber, and we, of course, talked about that last week, so if you want to know our thoughts on that, check out our last episode.
Yeah.
But the first episode we're talking about today is season 2, episode 11, and I have trouble talking about that being an episode, because again, each episode has 2 parts, but yeah. The first episode is Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy Part 3. I believe in total there's 6 of them, and even halfway through season 2, we already have Part 3. And I believe this episode is one of the most recognizable ones, if for no other reason, because it gave us the scene where Patrick is arguing back and forth with Man Ray about the wallet.
Yeah. So this is, the third in the Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy series of episodes, and it kind of dips a little bit more probably than before into the sort of Batman inspiration with the cave and so for this one, when SpongeBob and Patrick are kind of house sitting for Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy while they vacation, and they encounter one of the crime-fighting duo's biggest enemies, Man Ray, who's kind of like a sort of a stingray, I guess, or some sort of like tall manta ray or something, kind of like a robotic figure, kind of like yeah. And so they find him in a cryonic chamber, I guess you could call it, and kind of set him free and try to teach him to turn from evil to good.
Yeah, and they start to do this under false pretenses, because he's acting like if he turns good, then they'll release him. But he's only doing that so that he can be released so he can cause havoc. Of course, some hijinks ensue, like the whole infamous scene with the wallet that I'm sure everyone who's watched that episode can quote word for word.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, it also has spawned several memes. And anytime he supposedly starts to step out of line, they use the tickle belt that's been attached to him this whole time so that he just starts laughing uncontrollably until they move on to the next lesson.
Yeah.
And eventually, they get to a point where they think they've succeeded, so they take the belt off, and for a split second, it seems like it's worked, but then he just immediately pulls gadgets off the wall and goes to rob a bank. Problem is, the effects of the tickle belt are still affecting him, which makes him realize that his urge to do evil things no longer exists. So he's just like, okay, I guess I'll open a checking account. And then apparently his head is not actually his head, because when he goes to announce this to SpongeBob and Patrick, he officially shows that he's done, supposedly, with doing evil by removing what is presumed to be his head and giving it to them, and he just walks away without one.
It's kind of like Lex Luthor in the Superman movie I grew up with. I easily assumed for a long time he had hair, and then he pulls it off at the end and it's a wig.
Oh, yeah. I kind of forgot about that.
Yeah.
And it's kind of... It's definitely done better than how they handled Lex in the Batman v Superman movie, where he just did have hair and they shaved it off at the end. But that's a separate topic entirely.
Oh, yeah.
And then part 2 of episode 11 is Squirrel Jokes. And this is another episode that's kind of like the talent show one, where SpongeBob just doing some comedy, but he's having trouble raking in the audience, keeping their attention, until he tells a supposed joke about squirrels. And it starts a laughing riot from the audience, so he starts to roll with it, much to Sandy's dismay. And when he kind of convinces her at first that it's all just for laughs, like no one's actually laughing at her, it seems to work, and then she realizes that everyone starts to treat her differently in that they're taking the jokes way too seriously.
Yeah. And eventually, she kind of plays some clever revenge on him, kind of tapping into all those savagely comedic comments that he jokes about, kind of transforming herself into this like goofy hillbilly caricature to get back at him.
Yeah, and it does pay off, because he even says no more squirrel jokes. And his solution at this point is to basically not target her specifically, because he starts going after himself and everybody else. So basically, by the end, he becomes an insult comic, and it seems to work for everybody, regardless of who he's talking to. Even the joke he makes at Mr. Krabs' expense, even Mr. Krabs laughs at it.
It's kind of reminds me of, there was a more recent Arthur episode where Arthur is kind of making jokes about one other kid in the cast, and kind of ignoring the signs that it's not really funny to them. And eventually, things are resolved, but no, they kind of turn the tables on him playfully. Like, I guess they figure he's thicker skinned than they are.
Is this the one where he tells Sue Ellen that the coat she's wearing makes her look like a sheepdog?
That's the one, yes.
Okay, I figured that might be it, but I wasn't entirely sure.
Yeah.
Them being in third grade, there's plenty of episodes where they're laughing at or making fun of each other for some reason. Like there's an earlier one where Arthur hasn't lost a tooth yet, so they treat him like a baby.
Yeah.
But again, not to go too far off topic, because I'm sure we'll talk about Arthur eventually.
Yeah, I feel like I could probably say a lot about that.
Oh, for sure. But then Season 2, Episode 12, Part 1 is Pressure. And this is an episode I think a lot of people like because it gives a lot of screen time to most of the main cast, aside from maybe like Plankton. And the whole idea of this episode is it starts with SpongeBob and Sandy having a playful rivalry that develops into a competition between her and the sea creatures of SpongeBob, Patrick, Squidward, and Mr. Krabs as to, are sea creatures better or are land creatures better?
I remember this being my introduction to the character of Sandy, and I think I got a good first impression. She was pretty, I think, probably pretty interesting to watch. And this is probably one of the most creative episodes because in addition to the traditional hand-drawn animation that we usually see, there's also use of stick puppetry for scenes that happen above water on the surface world.
And those scenes aren't necessarily very long, but most of that does happen in like the last third, because at that point they've already had her try to do some things that sea creatures can do, and she flips the table on them, saying, "Okay, how about you guys go on land and see what happens? And if you can't even last a minute, I win." And the seagulls, for some reason, they just look hilarious to me. But possibly my favorite moment of the episode, it may just go back to how I've talked about whenever somebody says the word pickle in the show.
Yeah.
But after Sandy removes her suit, making it seem like she can stand there underwater like they can, she's actually holding her breath, and she has to find some container that contains air for her to breathe. So she ends up wearing a pickle jar on her head, and that's when she issues the challenge initially. "I want you guys to go on dry land," to which Squidward just plainly responds with, "Do we have to wear pickle jars?"
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and the seagulls kind of look like, if you ever like go to like the animatronic shows at Disney World, it's kind of like kind of like just the way their mouths flap. It's kind of funny.
Oh yeah, and even when SpongeBob introduces himself to one of them, they just turn to the camera like, "Seriously?"
Mm.
And then after Sandy fights them off and everyone's cheering, it cuts back to the seagulls one last time with most of their feathers gone, and they just go, "Hooray!"
Yeah.
And then part 2 is the smoking peanut. I feel like this is one of the lesser known episodes because I don't hear too many people talking about it from this season. But the premise is SpongeBob and Patrick go to, I think it's a zoo.
Yeah,
some
it
type
is.
of,
The zoo, yeah.
okay. And one of their main attractions is a giant clam that supposedly can do tricks. But when SpongeBob and Patrick get there, nothing's really happening. So SpongeBob tries to instigate the clam to move, and he throws a peanut at it. Immediately after that happens, the clam starts to get really upset, and they think it was because of that, or at least SpongeBob does.
It's kind of like the earlier episode we discussed before, Dying for Pie, where you see what looks like a certain like correlation or whatever the word is. You think this caused what we're seeing, and you don't really have a reason to think otherwise. But then, yeah, this is a millionth spoiler, but it kind of twists at the end, revealing, no, this is why.
Yeah, we won't give the actual culprit away for those that still want to see the episode, but it was not SpongeBob. But after a little while, he feels so guilty, thinking that he was the reason behind it, that he fesses up, especially when Patrick gets incorrectly framed and people start throwing peanuts at him. But then one of the caretakers of the clam stops the riot, and he reveals who actually caused the problem and what they did. But again, not going to give it away for those that still want to see it. Honestly, it is a good episode. I just don't see it get as much publicity as some of the others.
It's one of the most suspenseful ones, probably one of the darkest, because it spends a lot of time focusing on SpongeBob dealing with guilt, trying to cover up what he believes is kind of a crime against somebody. Yeah, and I remember this being adapted, or like Nickelodeon or some publisher adapting this into a kid's storybook with like pictures, and I think I might have owned a copy of the book.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, and it was after I'd seen the episode, and yeah, it was kind of like one of those easy to read chapter book things, kind of like that.
Yeah, I think I had a book similar to that for Naughty Nautical Neighbors, which is another episode we talked about previously.
Yeah.
And then moving on to episode 13, part 1 is actually not only a special that features Patchy, but it's a very special episode in general. Because this episode, when it first aired, gave the audience 3 possible endings that they could decide on while the episode aired.
So it was kind of like what they did with the Clue movie. Like, this is how it ended. No, this is how it ended. But I guess a bit more by fan decision from what you're describing.
You know, what ended up happening is after Patchy introduces the episode, he basically tells the audience, you will get a signal to let you know when it's time to start voting, and at that point you can call in. But for context, what happens in this episode is that SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward wind up on the Flying Dutchman's ship. And he has a rule book that states that they are part of his crew now. Squidward gets, I guess for lack of a better word, banished. But SpongeBob and Patrick stay loyal to him. They cause damage to his ship on accident and are not very good scarers. But then when they get a hold of one of his prized possessions, he says he'll give them a few wishes in order to get it back. They end up with 3, the traditional 3. SpongeBob and Patrick accidentally quickly use the first 2, and around this time Squidward pops back in. So they have to decide who gets the last wish. And it's at this point that the audience got to pick. So during the commercial break, there was actually a number they could call to say which ending they want to go with. Do they want SpongeBob to get the last wish, Patrick, or Squidward? And whatever they decided on would be the canonical ending from that point forward every time that episode aired. There's still ways to see what the other 2 would have been. But, of course, with him being the main character, the vote went with SpongeBob. And his ending was that the Flying Dutchman would be a vegetarian. Which seemed to work out at first, but then it's revealed they were also turned into fruits, so the Flying Dutchman could still try to eat them.
Fruits with their normal heads on them.
Yep.
Oddly. Yeah. Kind of like, more or less like that Hey Arnold episode where Arnold and Gerald are in fruit costumes for a school play.
I didn't see a lot of Hey Arnold growing up, but that's probably because I didn't have Nickelodeon or Cartoon Network.
I know.
But then part 2 is Gary Takes a Bath, which the episode title itself is quite self-explanatory. Although not as much as you think. Because even though it's called Gary Takes a Bath, most of the episode is just SpongeBob trying to get him to take a bath. Because Gary clearly doesn't want to.
Yeah, and this is probably one of my personal favorites because just the delivery of SpongeBob's dialogue, full of like a wide range of emotions like dry humor and sass, and it's I guess it's just so. Well, really, it's just the great emotional energy that Tom Kenny brought to it. It's just so. it sounds like top notch.
And there are some jokes in here that I'm surprised they kind of got away with. Probably the most infamous is when SpongeBob tries to use the ploy of them going to look for treasure, which is just the bathtub. And when he tries to convince Gary that a couple bars of soap are doubloons, he winks and says, "Don't drop them."
Right.
Which, if you don't know what the implication is there, I'll let you stay clear-minded so you don't have to be too informed. But possibly my favorite moment in this episode is when Gary just randomly defies physics. Because SpongeBob is repeatedly trying to throw him in the tub. And eventually Gary is just hovering over the tub for a second before he just pops instantly to another location next to SpongeBob.
Yeah.
And it's never explained, but it's just so funny how they go about it.
Yeah.
And then, again, even though it's called Gary Takes a Bath, through various shenanigans, it's SpongeBob who ends up taking the bath.
Yeah.
And then we get to a few episodes in a row that are some of the highest rated in the season, if not the series. And starting with Season 2, Episode 14, with Welcome to the Chum Bucket. And in this episode, after losing a bet to Plankton, Mr. Krabs is forced to give SpongeBob's employment over to Plankton. Which leads to a short but kind of catchy song where they're singing across the street from each other. And from what I understand, the person that was the singing voice for Mr. Krabs was not his normal voice actor. I don't remember what the reason for that was, but once you know, it's kind of easy to tell the difference between how Mr. Krabs normally sounds and that song. And Plankton tries, through Karen's recommendation, to get on SpongeBob's good side so that he'll make him a Krabby Patty. But as the episode goes on, SpongeBob gets lazier and lazier and more sassy, which irritates Plankton, who then takes out his brain, puts it into a robot, but then the robot acts the same way, which drives Plankton crazy.
Yeah, and the ending is kind of like, I feel like it's derivative of the Ransom of Red Chief story, which is like a classic comedy story that I personally like, where Mr. Krabs pretty much requires Plankton to pay him to take SpongeBob back.
Yeah. There was always one thing I did wonder about this episode. Maybe it's just because there were some technicalities with the contract that SpongeBob had, but I always wondered, after he was transferred over to the Chum Bucket, why didn't he just quit his job and then immediately go back across the street?
Right.
But maybe I'm just thinking too much into it.
And maybe we wouldn't have an episode.
That is also true. But then part 2 is a very famous episode, all because of one character whose name is actually in the title, Frankendoodle.
Yeah.
And in this episode, we actually start with a live-action sequence where Plankton's voice actor is a guy just sitting on a boat trying to draw a picture, but his only pencil that he brought for some reason falls into the water. After SpongeBob and Patrick find it, they realize that anything they draw comes to life. So SpongeBob ends up drawing a version of himself that eventually gets referred to as Frankendoodle, or Doodlebob. And they realize just how much trouble he's causing, so they try to erase him.
Yeah. And the Doodlebob character is kind of like the Despicable Me minions before Despicable Me, just sort of gibberish sounding dialogue.
Yeah, he's most famous for saying "me hi, me nai." Yeah, for most of the episode, he doesn't say any actual words. I think there is one instance where he's scaring the crud out of SpongeBob, where he just goes, "You doodle, me SpongeBob."
Yeah.
But eventually he gets trapped in a book, and for the longest time, this was his only episode. He eventually comes back much later in the show. I don't know the context behind it. I haven't really seen it. But I love this episode for a lot of the physical hijinks they get into. Like when Patrick has to try and distract Doodlebob, he just goes, "Happy birthday, here's your present." And it's just a rock that Doodlebob smacks him over the head with. And then they get stuck in a pit. Doodlebob drops a wrench on his head, to which he just goes, "Where's the leak, man?"
Yeah.
And immediately after that, Doodlebob draws a bowling ball off of a rock rolls it into Patrick, whose head turns into a pin for a second, and he gets hit twice. When SpongeBob asks if he's okay, he just randomly shouts, "Finland!" Yeah, like with many moments in this episode, there's a lot that people recognize, there's a lot that people quote or reference. It's just an overall good episode, and it's probably the reason why episode 14 is highly rated. But then the next episode is quite possibly, well, part 2 of it is possibly like the highest rated episode, and we'll get to that in a second, but part 1 of episode 15 is the secret box. And the aforementioned secret box actually belongs to Patrick, and SpongeBob, for the vast majority of it, is trying to figure out what's inside that box.
Yeah.
Especially since Patrick's protection of it goes so over the top that all it does is drive SpongeBob's curiosity even further. And eventually, even though Patrick warns him if he ever tries to take it again, their friendship will be done, SpongeBob goes into heist mode, going into Patrick's house to try and take it. And despite all these crazy noises and sound effects that SpongeBob is causing, it doesn't wake Patrick up until he quietly says, "Man, Patrick sure is a heavy sleeper."
Yeah. Yeah. It's probably one of the most suspenseful moments in the whole series, because he's trying to be extremely quiet and try to get in there without being heard at all. And like every little step, every little tiptoe step he takes, there's this random sound effect going on. It's kind of like if you've ever had to share a bedroom or share a camping tent with somebody, and you got to get up to go to the bathroom or something, and you try to sneak out as quietly as you can. So it's relatable like that.
Oh, it definitely is. And while we won't give away exactly what's in the box, we'll say that SpongeBob is at first underwhelmed, and he's just like, "Oh, is that it? Okay, that's cool." And then he leaves. But Patrick reveals that what's actually in the box turns out to be one of SpongeBob's guesses from earlier.
Yeah.
But now we get to what is possibly the most popular episode, not only in the season, but in the entire show. And fun fact, last I checked, is Tom Kenny's favorite episode in general. We're talking about Band Geeks.
And this is probably the one we've quoted to each other, us and a couple or so friends, probably more than any other one.
Oh, for sure. Because probably the scene we quote the most is the whole, "Well, maybe it wouldn't sound so bad if some people didn't try to play with big, meaty claws."
What did you say, punk?
Big, meaty claws!
Right. Yeah.
But of course the whole "is mayonnaise an instrument" thing. I personally love the whole parade where even when the camera is so far away from them, you can still see the outline of Pearl's head.
Yeah.
But I think a reason why this episode is so loved, there's actually a few. One being it kind of highlights most, if not all, of the main characters throughout the show. Even if their moments are brief, they still get some moments to shine.
Yeah.
Like when Plankton is supposedly playing the harmonica and he's running back and forth to each of the holes, exhausting himself. Of course, Patrick has the "is mayonnaise an instrument" thing, and when Sandy shoves his body through a trumpet. Mr. Krabs has the big meaty claws thing. Mrs. Puff even gets a moment in there or two. Everybody gets a moment to shine, but I think, especially as a lot of us got older, a big reason we love this episode is partly because of the song, but it's an episode where something good happens to Squidward. Because when you're a kid, you look at these characters and be like, I really like SpongeBob, or I really like Patrick. Squidward is just so grumpy and mean. But as we got older, we started to relate to Squidward more, and we were just so thrilled to see him so happy. Especially since this episode also introduced his rival, Squilliam. And Squidward just had this big moment where Squilliam kind of like had a heart attack and was carried off. It was such a great episode. There wasn't one moment that I was sitting there like, okay, let's keep it rolling. It started off with a joke. It established a rivalry for Squidward. All the characters got a moment in there. They got a great song near the end, and Squidward was just a happy guy.
Yeah, probably some of the funniest moments in the whole series are in this episode. Like two guys just flying off, and then somebody plays over there, or Patrick getting his head through the horn, and yeah.
Or I think this moment is supposedly the day before the time they're supposed to perform, and Squidward's like, I have a theory. People talk loud when they want to sound smart, right? Correct. So if we play loud, people might think we're good. So when he tries that, everyone just lets out one big blast that shatters all the windows around them. Squidward's face is all messed up, and he just goes, okay, new theory. Maybe we should play so quietly no one can hear us. And then, of course, that's where the whole big meaty claws moment comes in. I honestly can't think of any issue that I or anyone else has with this episode. It's probably the closest you will get to a perfect episode.
Oh yeah, it is a good one.
Absolutely. If you haven't seen Band Geeks before, and even are slightly familiar with the SpongeBob franchise, do yourselves a favor, go check this one out. But now we will move on to Season 2, Episode 16, which also still has a highly rated episode, Graveyard Shift. And this is one of those... I think there's multiple episodes with this plot point, but Mr. Krabs ends up keeping the Krusty Krab open for 24 hours a day, all because one person showed up right after closing saying that he would give them money. But of course Mr. Krabs doesn't stay there because he's got a life. But of course after those customers leave, basically nothing happens, nobody's there. So SpongeBob and Squidward start entertaining themselves. But before that even happens, Squidward delivers a line that leads to probably one of my favorite moments in the episode, where he's like, who wants a Krabby Patty at 3 in the morning? And then it just cuts to Patrick's only moment in the episode, where he's sleeping at home, his alarm clock goes off, he's like, oh boy, 3 a.m. And he just starts eating a sandwich. But then, after that little cutaway gag, the real meat and potatoes, if you will, comes when Squidward tries to scare SpongeBob by telling him about a supposedly terrifying story that happened on that very day at the Krusty Krab many years ago, where somebody worked there in SpongeBob's position, supposedly cut off his own hand, replaced it with a rusty spatula, and was hit by a bus. And he was known as the hash-slinging slasher.
Yeah. And it gets to a point where the events described in Squidward's story appear to be actually happening, and said character, they think he's actually coming. It's kind of like if you've ever seen the movie Stranger Than Fiction, where Emma Thompson is writing a novel, and it's all about this fictional character that she is totally unaware is a real person with that name who exists in real life. Kind of like that.
Yeah, it is very similar. Because, even though Squidward made up the story, there were a lot of coincidences that started to come into play. But then the reveal happens that shows that, most of it was just coincidental. But then the joke at the very end, I know, confused a lot of people, especially kids. Because it showed who was flickering the lights the whole time.
Yeah.
And most people I knew, even when they showed him and said his name, most people I knew had no idea who that was.
Yeah. Yeah. Because
he's from like a very, very classic horror film.
Yeah, it's like some old vampire flick or something.
There's something to that effect, yeah. And I think even recently, there was a new movie under that character's name, which I haven't seen, but yeah. Now that I know who the character is, that punchline is a lot funnier. But when I first saw that episode and saw that character, I'm thinking, wait, who is that?
Yeah.
And then part 2 is an episode called Krusty Love. And in this episode, Mrs. Puff comes to the Krusty Krab, and Mr. Krabs, for whatever reason, just gets really attracted to her and gets SpongeBob to try and help impress her.
Yeah. And he's just, I guess, a red-blooded hormonal male, like the next one.
Yeah, pretty much. And at some point in the episode, they go to her house, and anytime she even remotely says something that she likes, Mr. Krabs goes to ask SpongeBob to use his card to spend money on whatever it is she just said. But every time he does that, Mr. Krabs gets upset with him that he's spending his money, and eventually SpongeBob cracks. It's like, don't tell me. You want me to run to the store to get something for her that she doesn't need, and then you're going to be like, oh, but it's for Mrs. Puff. And then I'll come back, and you'll say, SpongeBob, you're wasting all my money.
Yeah. Yeah, that definitely was the point by far the most that I got irritated with Mr. Krabs. It's like, because it's like a no-win for poor old SpongeBob. He's like, he's doing what he says, and then when he does it, he's like having a fit.
Well, yeah, especially since at first Mr. Krabs was like, I know I want to spend this money, but don't let me spend money. But then he just pressures SpongeBob into doing it anyway, and then gets upset at him when he does. And even though you can't tell what he says, there is a segment where SpongeBob is just saying a bunch of bleeped things, to which Mrs. Puff pulls out a dictionary and she's like, oh my goodness.
Yeah. Well, it's a bunch of like mostly gibberish words, and then like Mr. Krabs and stuff in between.
Yeah, and that whole segment kind of pays off with an episode that we'll talk about in a little bit that is kind of dedicated to that. Yeah. But we'll get to that in a little bit. Overall, this one was a good episode, and it does kind of pay off a little bit. Mm-hmm. They don't really explore this relationship too much in the future. Mm-hmm. But now that I think about it, there was one moment that is kind of hilariously dark, where Mr. Krabs hears her name, Mrs. Puff, thinking she's married, and when he finds out that she isn't, he's like, wait, what happens to Mr. Puff? And it cuts to a live-action moment where you just see a pufferfish that has been turned into a lamp. And then Season 2, Episode 17 starts with Part 1, a very relatable episode to many people who have been in school and had to do similar things. Procrastination.
Oh, yeah.
And in this episode, SpongeBob has to write an essay for boating school, all centered around what he's not supposed to do while driving a boat. But as the episode implies, he's constantly procrastinating for one reason or another, and he's quickly running out of time. He keeps trying to find excuses not to do it, even calling Patrick in the middle of the night who calls him out. Even the mailman who just randomly shows up briefly at some point somehow knows that he has an essay to write and calls him out on it as well. And eventually he falls asleep, has a nightmare, wakes up, realizes he's running out of time. So he thinks of all the things that he did while procrastinating. It's like, wait, you can't do that while driving. You can't do this. And he turns it in. Like, he gets there just in time to hand in his assignment, only to find out the assignment was canceled.
It's really one of the most relatable episodes because, like how many of us, I've got like a homework assignment that doesn't look so fun, and you really don't want to touch it or go near that thing, right? Admittedly, even in high school, I did not have the best study habits. I was not really good at committing or reviewing for tests, if I'm honest. So,
yeah, a lot of people definitely know how that feels. And regardless of what stage of school I was in, one of my least favorite things to do was write essays, especially if they had a specific word limit to hit.
Yeah.
Like, it has to be at least like 5,000 words, 10,000 words, whatever. And this is especially the case when the essay required us to talk about a certain thing, and I'm thinking, they want us to write 10,000 words about this, when really I could answer the main topic in like 2 sentences.
Yeah.
So really, at that point, it becomes less about writing a cohesive report or something, and just trying to find a way to pad out a simple answer into 10,000 words, which often leads to that procrastination.
Yeah, and I remember I had a course in college a couple times or so. They would require, write this in at least this many words, and I would, I guess you could call it a shortcut. I would just try to drag out the sentences, like make them as long as possible, or like super fancy or whatever, because I thought, I don't know, the teachers would like that or something, and I would just really, really try. Anything, to any word, any verbiage, just to hit the minimum.
Yeah, I remember in college I think it was my astronomy class that I did in my first semester, where I was talking about Saturn, and I was running out of things to say, so what I ended up doing was talking about the moons that Saturn has, and it has quite a few of them, so I just started listing all the names of the different moons that it has. And my professor was like, yeah, don't do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, essays, not my favorite thing to do. And even if this isn't like the most high rated episode ever, it's definitely one of the most relatable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then part 2 has I'm with Stupid. And in this episode, Patrick's parents, quote unquote, as we'll address in a moment here, come to visit Patrick, and he wants to make a good impression, because they think he's still an absolute moron. So what SpongeBob volunteers to do is make himself look idiotic to make Patrick look really smart by comparison. which Patrick takes way more advantage of than he should. And it leads to a very ironic statement where Patrick wears a shirt that says "I'm with stupid," and he's just like, "Dumb people are always blissfully unaware of how dumb they really are."
Yeah. Yeah, that is probably the most, I guess, the word is profound, astute, or true, or whatever thing that Patrick has ever said.
Yeah, every once in a while he has an absolute random smart moment, or even whole episodes where he becomes a lot smarter. But yeah, for the most part, he's still the doofus that we know and love. But yeah, the folks show up. SpongeBob commits to acting like an idiot. But Patrick starts to laugh at him along with these people. But then eventually SpongeBob just says, "You know what? I've had enough of this." So he tries to say, "Hey, I am a smart person, and I was just acting like this so you would appreciate Patrick more." It still backfires for a while, and then it is revealed eventually those two aren't even Patrick's actual parents.
Which more or less probably broke the tension for a little bit.
Yeah, it definitely did, and then there are some inconsistencies with this, because they show who are supposedly Patrick's actual parents soon after, but then you have the Patrick Star show that's out now, where his parents are seen, and they look nothing like that.
Yeah, but I'd easily forgotten by then. And I watched the first episode, and I thought it was pretty funny. Absurd, maybe, but still funny.
Yeah, I've seen a handful of episodes from the Patrick Star Show, and I still get a kick out of them for one reason or another. And maybe I have to see more to fully appreciate it. But we'll see, eventually. But then we get to Season 2, Episode 18. Part 1 is actually one of the few episodes that has been banned on most streaming services. And we kind of alluded to this episode a moment ago, and it's called Sailor Mouth. Mm-hmm. And in this episode, SpongeBob and Patrick basically find out what curse words are. And they don't realize at first that what they're saying is bad, so they start to exploit it to a high degree, much to the chagrin of everybody around them.
Yeah. And instead of the normal beep sensor, they use a dolphin sound, I guess, to kind of make it a little more kid level or whatever.
Yeah, and a little bit of a humorous effect to it. And when Mr. Krabs lectures them, it turns out that in their world, there's 13 bad words that they can't use. Yeah.
To which Squidward says, "Don't you mean there are only 7?" And I started thinking, is that like a cryptic reference to like the infamous George Carlin monologue? If you know what I'm talking about, the 7 words you can't say on TV.
Yeah, I do remember hearing about that. I don't know what Carlin said, but I probably shouldn't.
Yeah, it was like an infamous like FCC case or something. Yeah. And
when Squidward asks that question, Mr. Krabs responds with, "Not if you're a sailor."
Yeah.
Which, the sailors are infamous for that, which is why there's the phrase "swearing like a sailor." Right. Or Sailor Mouth, as the episode is called.
Or cursing like a drunken sailor.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, and that phrase is literally used in an episode of the sitcom Everybody Hates Chris, in which Chris, the fictionalized version of Chris Rock as a kid, and actually hears the Carlin monologue and kind of like shares the list of words with like everybody at school, and you can imagine the trouble that happens.
Oh, absolutely. But of course, with that being, I think that's a Disney show, right?
Everybody Hates Chris.
Yeah.
Nah. I mean, the main guy in it was in a Disney Channel movie, like around or after that time, but I think it was like on I'm sure what network, like the CW or something.
Okay, maybe that's why I was getting confused.
Yeah.
But I definitely know of the show.
Yeah.
And they vow not to use the words again, which doesn't last very long before one of them accidentally utters it. But then when they go to confront Mr. Krabs about it, they both say it. So he's about to punish them, but then he stubs his foot and says all 13 words back to back.
Yeah.
So they go to tell his mom. They all say the words in front of her, and she punishes all of them.
Yeah.
And then you think she says a word, but it turns out that it's just Old Man Jenkins driving by in his car.
Yeah.
But then we get to part 2, Artist Unknown. And this episode starts off on kind of a positive note for Squidward, because he gets to the point with his art where he's put in a position where he can teach it. The only problem is the only person that signs up for his class is SpongeBob. And it turns out that not only is SpongeBob really good at it, but in many respects, he's better than Squidward. Because half the things that Squidward tries, he can't seem to do. Like just drawing a simple circle, which SpongeBob does flawlessly, all while drawing a perfect human face. And this is also an episode that could have potentially ended well for Squidward, because eventually he just gets really upset that nothing he's doing seems to be working. So he just starts trashing the place. And when this famous art collector comes by to pick up a piece that he and SpongeBob accidentally damaged previously, he just leaves without turning around. And then it's revealed after he walks away that what Squidward accidentally created was like this perfect piece of art.
Yeah. Abstract, perhaps.
Yeah, it's one of those ones that is like a sculpture of a human that is censored in the correct places.
Right. Right.
But according to this art collector, it's done so flawlessly that it was dubbed by him as like the greatest artist who ever lived. But of course, Squidward already left, so the credit wasn't given to him. And then Season 2, Episode 19. We have Jellyfish Hunter, not to be confused with jellyfishing. And this is another episode of mine that I personally really like. And the story is that SpongeBob brings in some jelly that he got from a jellyfish to make his own little sandwich during lunch break. One of the customers there realizes what he's doing and asks to try it himself. And when he does, he breaks into another one of those short but catchy songs where he tells everybody else in the facility about it. They all try it. They love it. And of course, when Mr. Krabs realizes that he can make a lot of money from this, he asks SpongeBob to get literally every single... Well, he doesn't deliberately say get all the jellyfish out of the field. He just keeps asking him to get more every time he brings some in. And it gets to the point where he gets all of them except for one. And it's the only jellyfish that, according to him, he's never caught.
Yeah. Mr. Krabs will... Seems like he'll do just anything for gain.
Oh yeah, he's infamous for his greed and how far he'll go to even make a few cents, quite literally. And at first, SpongeBob doesn't really catch on to how this is affecting the jellyfish, but then when SpongeBob is being chased down by this blue jellyfish that he's never caught, that jellyfish takes him to Mr. Krabs' new factory that shows how badly he's been exploiting these jellyfish, basically torturing them in surprisingly gruesome ways that they do show on screen. Like how some of them are getting flattened with like a baking roller. So SpongeBob is convinced by this blue jellyfish to set all the ones in there free, and he does. And to kind of show his appreciation, the blue jellyfish lets himself get caught. But there was one thing about this episode that I always ask, because it's kind of funny. It's not something I have an issue with necessarily. But it's when Mr. Krabs is on his exercise bike type thing and he's listening to music. But the way the headphones are positioned, it's kind of as if he's listening to music with his eyes. It's more of a visual gag than anything else, and I honestly think it's really funny, but it's a little tidbit that I like to point out every time it shows up.
Yeah.
I don't know if you had any other thoughts about this episode.
No, just like I don't know. I'm not sure like where his ears would be. I think he has like two antennae atop his eyes or something. But
well, for the most part, none of them have definitive visual ears, although they'll sometimes come into play if needed.
Yeah.
Like in the previously mentioned episode, Sailor Mouth, at one point Squidward is walking past the speaker, and when he hears one of the curse words, he suddenly forms an ear on the side of his head that he has to push back in. So, yeah, it's more that it's kind of a suspension of disbelief thing where they don't appear to have ears, but you can tell they can still hear everything. But then part 2 of episode 19 is one of my personal favorite episodes, the Fry Cook Games. And in this episode, they have in Bikini Bottom what is essentially their fry cook version of the Olympics, where they have these various events centered around fry cooking in some capacity. And it starts off with talking about the rivalry between Mr. Krabs and Plankton, which then is kind of transferred to SpongeBob and Patrick.
yeah, Mr. Krabs and Plankton have previously competed in the games against each other, and now they have their new quote-unquote champions kind of representing them this time.
Yeah, and their champions, as it turns out, are SpongeBob and Patrick. And Patrick literally started working at the Chum Bucket while these games were happening just so he could compete, much to SpongeBob's frustration, because it feels like he's not really taking this seriously, so they start facing off, and they kind of go back and forth a few times, leading to many very funny moments, like Mr. Krabs tells SpongeBob in the deep-fried pole vault, win this one for the Krusty Krab. So he shouts, "For the Krusty Krab," as he goes. And then when it's Patrick's turn, Plankton goes, "Win this one because I told you to." And Patrick follows suit. He just goes, "Because you told me to." And he does successfully get over the bar, but then he catapults the deep-fried grease into the audience that get turned into fish sticks.
And then probably my favorite event, the chocolate high dive. Just, they pretty much make themselves into like living chocolate dip desserts.
And SpongeBob, he takes it how you would expect. Like, he jumps off the board, does a few flips, and lands perfectly. Patrick, all he does is stay perfectly still as he slowly tips over the edge of the diving board. And while his landing is supposedly rough, it then cuts to a brief moment of a strawberry cone with a chocolate dip, which he was trying to impersonate. But yeah, there are many visual gags like that in this episode. And the biggest insult they throw around with each other for a while is just how one of them's yellow, one of them's pink.
Right.
And the big payoff happens during the final event where they're wrestling, which has the infamous, "My name's not Rick." But yeah, the payoff comes when their pants fall and they both see what they have underneath. And then they just walk away. It just kind of ends there, which honestly is kind of funny in of itself. Especially since, as they're doing so, Plankton goes, "Get back here and kill each other!"
Yeah, it's kind of like, yeah. It's like all of a sudden, you know, tension's broken, everything's good again, and yeah, it is a happy ending.
Oh yeah, I kind of wish there were more episodes that explored this type of thing, but for what it is, it's definitely a good episode. Has many wonderful gags. It's another one like Band Geeks that I heavily encourage people to check out, because it's one of those, at least somewhat, if not completely unique episodes that doesn't have a repeated premise. And then we get into the final episode of Season 2. And Part 1 is Squid on Strike. It's another one of those episodes where the title at least kind of gives you an idea of what to expect.
Yeah.
So Squid on Strike has Squidward going on strike after he thinks he's unfairly treated, and in many respects he's right.
Yeah, if you would just look at the papers that Mr. Krabs handed them, and I won't go into too much detail, you know, like a million little things, you know, he's threatening to fine them for. It's ridiculous. I guess it kind of makes sense in a sense. He wants to see super productivity, improvement of productivity in the workplace, but at the same time, it's crazy nitpicky. It's kind of like, if you remember the TV character Terry Tate, office linebacker, kind of amped up to 11.
I'm not too familiar with that character myself.
Yeah, I've mentioned it before on the podcast. It was probably a long time ago, but
okay.
Yeah.
But as he's about to go on strike, he actually convinces SpongeBob to join him. And while SpongeBob at first isn't doing it well because he still loves working there, it eventually gets to the point where SpongeBob is actually participating. And by the time that happens, Squidward starts to arrange an agreement with Mr. Krabs. But because Squidward drove SpongeBob so far, he ends up basically destroying the restaurant, thinking that, oh, this will convince Mr. Krabs to give us our jobs back, which technically works.
Yeah, it's SpongeBob pretty much taking, you know, like Squidward's speech words way too literally and just creating a huge mess.
And I think this is the episode that ends with the longest time card in the show's history, where it just goes, one eternity later. And it shows SpongeBob and Patrick as skeletons, still working there. And then the final episode of Season 2 is Sandy, SpongeBob, and the Worm.
Yeah, which is basically, the plot is basically Godzilla threatening Bikini Bottom.
In a way, yeah, except as the episode name implies, it's a giant worm.
Yeah.
Or at least giant to them.
Yeah.
And they're trying to figure out what do we do? How do we get rid of this worm? What should we do about the city? And as Sandy decides that she's going to go do it, she leaves. SpongeBob goes with her to try and stop her. And while they leave and they're trying to figure out a solution, Patrick comes up with an idea that the entire town actually gets behind, where he comes up with the famous line, "We should take Bikini Bottom and push it somewhere else."
Yeah.
And they actually do it.
Yeah, at first they think it's crazy, but then for some reason they're like later, what was your idea again?
And then it just cuts to them starting to push it.
Yeah.
And then you don't see most of the town too much for the rest of the episode because it focuses on the three characters in the title. Sandy goes, SpongeBob tries to stop him, even going as far as to speak complete gibberish. And she's like, well, that did stop me for a second, but I'm not going to stop going after this worm. And she goes into what she thinks is a cave, and she wrestles with what she thinks is the worm itself, which, to be fair, they designed this worm to make it look like, yeah, that's totally the worm, and she's totally inside a cave, only to pan outwards and realize, nope, she just had the tongue. That whole cave is the worm.
Yeah.
And the worm gets mad, starts chasing them. They succeed eventually in getting away from it by having him go over the side of a cliff.
Yeah.
And it's at the bottom of this cliff where the town ended up pushing the city.
Yeah.
And I don't think this is one of those episodes that people talk a lot about either, which is kind of a shame because it has some of the most quoted lines in the show, especially the whole pushing Bikini Bottom somewhere else thing.
Oh yeah, it was on a Watch Mojo list, that specific quote. I think it was like their list of like best Patrick quotes. I think it was on there somewhere.
Well, good. I'm glad to know that it has at least some recognition, for sure.
Yeah.
I think one of the other often quoted moments is when I forget exactly what leads into it, but okay. So Sandy, before she leaves, she says, "I'll get that worm for you if you're willing to pay."
Yeah.
And Mr. Krabs goes, "You'll never get a cent out of me. I'd rather that worm come in here right now and eat you all alive."
Yeah.
And he's salivating or foaming at the mouth while he's saying it too. But no, it's still an overall good episode and a solid way to end season 2.
Oh yeah, it's a decent one.
Yeah, not my personal favorite, but it's still consistent with how solid most of the episodes in the first 3 seasons are.
Yeah, and that's pretty much the full second season.
Yeah, and I don't know if you wanted to start season 3 or kind of hold off until next week.
Yeah, I think we'll hold off. And until next time, everybody, stream us on YouTube and YouTube Music, and tell us, any of your favorite SpongeBob gags, characters, episodes, whatever, and and maybe tell us about your experiences with SpongeBob, maybe watching the show, or maybe if you've been to Universal Theme Park, which I have, and seen SpongeBob and Squidward, please, reach out.
Yeah, and are you like Tom Kenny, where Band Geeks is your favorite episode? Is your favorite episode even part of any of the first 3 seasons? What quotes do you make the most? Which episodes do you often reference with your friends? Because for us, it often is Band Geeks.
Yeah.
But yeah, many memorable moments from this season. Thank you for joining us for season 2, and we'll see you next week when we at least start season 3.
All right. Well, until then, goodbye, everybody.
So long.